Money dries up fast. Desperate Harry and Meghan hit after Archewell and Netflix as ever failure. The money didn't just slow down, it started screaming on the way out, and suddenly the fairy tale glow shattered into panic, pressure, and whispered desperation that no PR spin could hide anymore. This isn't about headlines anymore. This is about survival. Behind the manicured smiles, behind the polished speeches, behind the carefully staged philanthropy, something ugly has been unfolding in silence. The cash flow that once felt endless, shrinking. The deals that once felt guaranteed, drying up. The safety net that once felt royal grade thick, fraying thread by thread. And the most dangerous part? Everyone can see it now. For years, Harry and Meghan sold the world a narrative of freedom, independence, and limitless opportunity. They walked away from royal life, promising they'd thrive without it. Bigger platforms, bigger influence, bigger money. Netflix came rushing in. Spotify followed. Publishing giants lined up. Hollywood rolled out the red carpet. For a moment, it looked unstoppable. But fast forward, and suddenly the picture looks very different. The Archewell empire, once pitched as a global force for good, has quietly unraveled. Not with an announcement, not with transparency, but with rebrands, disappearing websites, staff layoffs, and IRS filings that scream distress louder than any tabloid ever could. Donations dropped. Outside support vanished. What was once celebrated as visionary now looks like damage control in slow motion. And insiders are whispering the part no one wants to say out loud. This wasn't strategy. This was pressure. Pressure to keep the lights on. Pressure to keep appearances. Pressure to maintain a lifestyle that burns millions a year while income sources quietly collapse. When a charity starts reshaping itself behind closed doors, when filings reveal most of the money is self-funded, when donors disappear without explanation, that's not evolution. That's warning sirens blaring. Then came the move that made even seasoned royal watchers gasp. Private dinners, $100,000 per seat, not a gala, not a transparent fundraiser, intimate access, proximity. Selling the chance to sit at the table with them. Critics didn't hesitate. They called it what it looked like, monetizing themselves, turning relevance into a commodity. And once you reach the point where access to you is the product, the illusion of power starts cracking fast. Behind palace walls, this didn't go unnoticed. The timing was everything. As Archewell quietly weakened, as Netflix cooled, as Meghan's as ever lifestyle brand launched with heavy hype, and then fizzled. Reviews lukewarm, sales underwhelming, free products quietly bundled to move inventory. For a woman who built her image on precision and control, the optics were brutal. And right in the middle of this financial unraveling, a letter landed on the desk of the king. Polished, calm, carefully worded. No accusations, no explosive language, just diplomacy wrapped in velvet. Meghan, according to insiders, wasn't asking for reconciliation. She was asking for reinstatement, permission to represent the monarchy abroad, permission to wear royal regalia, permission to step back into the royal spotlight under the language of service. But the palace saw through it instantly. This wasn't about duty. This was about leverage. Royal symbolism carries weight. Weight that opens doors, secures security, justifies presence, and rebuilds prestige. And at a moment when their independent brand was wobbling, that symbolism suddenly mattered again. Too much. The response was swift, cold, final. You do not represent the crown. You are not entitled to its symbols. You do not speak in its name. Authorized at the very top. That single message crushed weeks of speculation and exposed something far deeper. The monarchy believed the request was transactional, not heartfelt, not reconciliatory, a strategic play to reclaim relevance when the money pressure became impossible to ignore. Inside royal circles, the reaction hardened fast. The idea of royal imagery being used to prop up commercial decline crossed a line. Selling access while asking for crowns? That was unforgivable. And it only got worse. Sources claim the letter didn't stop her requests, it compared. Questioned. Criticized other royals for holding quiet positions without global visibility. A dangerous move, because in the royal world, silence isn't weakness, it's loyalty. And loyalty is currency the palace never devalues. Instead of opening doors, the letter slammed them shut. Within hours of the rejection, something else happened. Silence. No leaks. No outrage, no immediate clapback. And that silence was louder than anything. It wasn't peace, it was regrouping. Because insiders know the pattern by now. When the narrative fails, it gets reframed. Controlled leaks, sympathy pivots, carefully placed whispers painting rejection as fear, as jealousy, as insecurity from an institution threatened by her global appeal. But this time, The public mood has shifted. The Netflix pipeline slowed. Spotify walked away. No follow-up book. No blockbuster podcast revival. The Montecito mansion still drains millions a year. Security bills keep climbing. And without fresh mega deals, the math doesn't lie. This isn't scandal anymore, it's exposure. Exposure of what happens when royal mystique fades and commercial appeal doesn't replace it fast enough. Exposure of a brand built on proximity now forced to sell that proximity outright. Exposure of ambition outrunning sustainability. And the palace? Unmoved. No interviews, no rebuttals, just boundaries. Hard ones. Internal directives reinforcing that no royal symbols, no regalia, no hybrid roles would ever be allowed again. Not now, not later, not quietly. The era of ambiguity is over. For years, Harry and Meghan lived in the gray zone, royal enough to benefit, distant enough to criticize. That zone just collapsed. Titles remain, but the power behind them is gone. And without institutional backing, every future move depends on one thing alone: public trust. The question now isn't whether they'll speak again, it's whether anyone will listen the same way. The truth nobody wants to say out loud is this: the Sussex brand didn't collapse overnight. It bled out slowly, quietly, behind curated Instagram moments and carefully timed press drops. And now, the silence around them isn't respect, it's distance. Hollywood has a brutal rule: relevance must be fed constantly, or it dies. And once Netflix stopped returning calls with urgency, once Spotify quietly walked away, once pitches started landing without green lights, the illusion cracked. Not publicly, internally, where it hurts most. Executives stopped chasing them. They waited. Because when power shifts, the industry always knows before the audience does. The deals that once flowed freely suddenly required proof of concept. The enthusiasm turned cautious. Meetings became polite instead of excited. And that's when panic sets in. Not the dramatic kind, but the controlled, calculating kind that leads to desperate reinvention. That's where the charity dinners came in. $100,000 for proximity. In Hollywood circles, that move landed like a siren. When celebrities start selling access instead of work, it signals something very specific. The machine isn't producing anymore. You're no longer the product. Your presence is. And presence has an expiration date. Former supporters quietly pulled back. Donors who once loved the optics didn't want scrutiny. Because ears filings don't lie, and suddenly those numbers were telling an uncomfortable story. A charity largely funding itself, donations collapsing, staff disappearing, websites going dark without explanation. That's not growth, that's retreat. Inside Montecito, the lifestyle didn't shrink, the estate didn't downsize. Security didn't reduce, the spending never slowed, and that's where the math becomes terrifying. Millions out, inconsistent millions in, and no guaranteed pipeline ahead. This is the part people don't see. Royalty insulates against failure. Once you step away, failure hits harder because there's nothing left to hide behind. And that's why the palace letter mattered so much. It wasn't just a rejection. It was a door locking permanently. Because if that symbolic return had worked, everything changes. Overseas appearances justify security. Royal language restores credibility. Charity regains prestige. Deals become easier again. The crown would have stabilized the brand. But the crown said no. Cold, clear, non-negotiable. And that single word, no, detonated every fallback option at once. No royal ambassador role means no royal legitimacy. No tiara means no visual authority. No symbolic association means no blurred lines to exploit. Suddenly, every future venture has to stand on its own merit, and that's a terrifying place when momentum is gone. What followed was strategic silence. But don't confuse silence with acceptance. Behind the scenes, PR recalibration kicked in. Soft briefings, selective narratives, quiet comparisons designed to stir sympathy. The suggestion that rejection wasn't about rules, but fear. Fear of her popularity. Fear of her voice. Fear of her global reach. The problem? The public isn't buying it anymore. Because popularity without output fades. Voice without impact echoes. And global reach means nothing if engagement doesn't follow. Audiences are noticing the gaps, the promises that didn't materialize, the brands that launched loud and landed soft, the philanthropy that talks big but files small, the independence that still circles royalty for oxygen. And the palace sees it too. This time, they're not reacting emotionally. They're protecting the institution. Internal directives now exist. Legal boundaries are ready. Unauthorized use of royal symbolism won't be tolerated anymore. The gray zone is gone. No more hybrid identity. No more selective royalty. No more using the crown when convenient and rejecting it when accountability appears. That line is permanent. And here's the cruel irony. The heart of the Sussex narrative tries to lean into victimhood now, the weaker it looks. Because survival doesn't look like strength. It looks like scrambling. Another documentary might come, another podcast attempt, another reframing of history. But without access, without novelty, without institutional weight, the audience fatigue grows fast. People don't hate them. They're just moving on. And Hollywood moving on is fatal. The mansion still stands. The titles still exist. But influence? That's evaporating. Influence requires demand. And demand has cooled. This isn't punishment. It's consequence. They walked away believing independence meant unlimited freedom without loss. But every system has trade-offs. And now, with 2026 looming, the reckoning feels unavoidable. Because when relevance turns into resale, when charity turns into optics, when proximity turns into product, the game changes. And the monarchy? It already has. No more negotiations. No more waiting. No more emotional hesitation. Just structure, boundaries, and finality. For the first time since they left, the Sussexes aren't orbiting the crown anymore. They're watching it move on without them. And that might be the most devastating cut of all.